What's good, folks? This is Drew of Mode Can Code. This is actually the inaugural video because I wanted to get something off my chest. It was something that really got on my nerves, but I had to say something, as stupid as this mistake may be to a lot of you listening. So I did a technical test for Sainsbury yesterday. I thought I did really well, but I actually got stuck on the last question, and that was enough for me to fail the whole thing, according to Sainsbury. And unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to really explain my progress or anything like that. I ideally would have liked to retake that part of the test. Instead, I got an automated computer response saying that I didn't pass, try again next time, etc. Look on their job site for more roles, that usual insulting stuff that companies see fit to send candidates. So this video is going over my intended or ultimate solution to that particular problem. And a couple of things I want to say off the bat. Firstly, I think it's in really poor taste to offer trick questions in technical tests. That is something that is definitely unnecessary, especially when there's a time limit. And the second thing I want to say is, if you are going to declare somebody a complete failure, why not give the candidates an opportunity to explain what it is that they had an issue with? So anyway, as part of the last step of the last test in the technical test, I was presented with this code, and the idea was to fetch some data and process it to return a certain result. The first thing I got stuck on, and this is elementary for most of you, I'm pretty sure, is that I actually never had to do this. I know that fetching AJAX data or the like is asynchronous, as in part of the name AJAX. I just never had to do it inside of a synchronous function. I've always used the JavaScript framework, whether it's jQuery or Angular or Axios if I'm using React or Vue. So returning that value from the AJAX request was the biggest challenge. So ultimately what got me unstuck was just adding the word async to this function. And this was provided in the context of running unit tests as well, having to write unit tests. And then I wasn't sure if I had access to Axios, but I did a little research and came across, well, I used HTTPS in the example, but there was the fetch method here. And so ultimately I fetched the results from the endpoints, which is here. I was able to do some processing to get the JSON data and then returned the results. So I have to admit it took me a while to get to this solution, but this is how I would recreate the scenario in my local environment. So what we have here is a function for returning the JSON data. In this case, I'm just returning the number of items in the return data. And to be able to return this as, I guess, a synchronous function or a synchronous response, but I've wrapped this in async. I'm not even sure how the test was set up. But if I run this script, we should get the results. So we see that there are 20 rows here. So that was the first part, getting the JSON response. But then I had to process the information and return some structured information. I don't exactly remember what the information was, but there was a trick, another trick. So let's have a look at the JSON. In the meantime, I can start processing the information. We want to return some outputs. We wanted total, or rather number of items, and then the total. I'll just call it those. Forgot the equal sign. Haven't entirely had my coffee today. So this is the JSON information. And why I say this is a trick question. As part of the exercise, they wanted us to return the total number of items and subtotals. However, looking at this JSON structure, there are no specific quantities of items in the list. It took a while to realize that we have a measure amount and the price under unit price, and then there's retail price with an empty measure property. So I think we wanted to have the price divided, the price under the retail price, divide the unit price by that price, and then we get the quantity. So now I remember we were meant to provide a list of product UIDs, and from those product UIDs we build a list of items along with the number of items ordered as well as the total. So with the product IDs as well, we want to include the UID, we want to include the subtotal, and we want to include the number of items ordered for that item. So let's add products to the list. We'll create a list like that, and then we'll iterate through each of the data items. I'll just call it row, and then of course we want to return the outputs instead of the data length here. So first we want to, for the sake of arguments, we will fetch the UID. I believe it is product UID. You can't actually see the JSON here. So we've got product UID, and we have we want to get the subtotal. How do we get the subtotal? I would say we get the unit price. And we actually access these using this notation because but this is a safer way of accessing those values. So that's the subtotal as far as I know, and then the item quantity. The quantity, I was expecting a specific quantity property, but there isn't one as far as I can see. I've looked, and again, that's why I suggested this was a trick question. I think it's in very, very bad taste, as I said before. But to get the quantity, I am assuming that we divide the unit price by the retail price. Nobody calls for goodness knows how long, and then as soon as I start recording, they want to get in contact. Anyway, so we have the subtotal already, and I will divide that subtotal by the retail price, and then we want to add an object, and we'll just use the properties as is. I'll rename that to quantity, and I'll rename this to product UID. And we also want to keep a running total of the number of items and the total amount. Okay, we don't even have to add any properties here. We could just add it to the number of items. For those who don't know, that's the same as this. Just shorthand. And we do the same thing for the total. It's feeling a little bit ill right now. And so if we run this, hopefully this works. Nope, we made an error somewhere. Wherever we made this error. Output push. We want to push to products. Okay, there's no shame in making these mistakes. It happens sometimes. Okay, so here we can see that there is a float value for the quantity. So what we can do is, since we know that we've ordered at least one item, we can use math ceiling. And I think this is okay to do because the quantity doesn't really affect anything else. So if you run this again, all right, you can see a list of products with the product UIDs, the quantities, and the subtotal for each of these. And if we add them all together, we should get the correct total price. If you really wanted to be fancy, we could round this value to 2 decimal places. outputs total equals outputs total to I think it's to precision. No, that's not to precision, to fixed. That would actually return a string. If we run this again, and I would say to convert it back to a number, we could use parse floats. Okay, that gives us a number there. Maybe we could also do math rounds. But this rounds it to the nearest integer. What we could do is multiply it by 100 and then divide by 100. Let's see what happens. Same thing. Alright, so that is how I would resolve that part of the test had I given it another shot. Maybe this isn't the exact thing. I wanted to make this video to show that I'm not as dumb as Sainsbury seems to think, or rather Sainsbury's computer seems to think. But to make you guys aware that unfortunately quite a few of these companies see fit to put in trick questions, or at least I think this was a trick question. In this age where people seem to be hiding behind computers and they let computers do the thinking for them, and they're very much wedded to this idea of computer says no. I personally think it's dodging a bullet when we come across those kinds of companies, because if they treat us like that at this stage, there's no telling what it's going to be like on the job. But maybe I'm absolutely wrong and it's sour grapes. Anyway, I put this video out and hopefully it will help you guys. It's given me some closure, I think. But let me know what you think in the comments. I promise that the next video is going to be a lot more organized than this. But until next time, this has been Drew of Mode Can Code. See you next time.